GG no re. It's been a while. Insert a clip of that song that's so lame. It's been a while. Thanks, Daniel.
Really, that's it.
Yeah, well, I'll hear that and then I'll do it. Okay. Yeah, you see. We four men are going to talk about a thing. We're going to talk about Tomb of Annihilation, which is the most recent Wizards of the Coast original Adventure Path product. We attempted to play it in the past. You can hear those episodes. However, it was aborted. It's gone now. We might play the dungeon, the titular dungeon, the eponymous dungeon, at some point, but because we have it on Roll20 and sunk costs and all that. But
wait, no, that's a fallacy.
I know. I choose to embrace the fallacy sometimes. Enjoy a bit of paradox or mystery in your life. In any case, nope. Cut that.
You did that.
Can't say in any case.
You know what? You're not perfect. It happens, Daniel.
No, it did not happen. I'll edit all that out. So we, in the process of doing the Hexcrawl portion that leads up to the Tomb of Annihilation, we came to many thoughts and opinions.
Some might say strong opinions.
About the particular instantiation of these mechanics in Tomb of Annihilation, and perhaps more generally, insightful observations, I hope. So what do we think about hexcrawling in Tomb of Annihilation? On a scale of...
Garbage.
Oh.
Garbage. Utter garbage.
No,
very poorly executed.
We're going to put it on a scale. So on a scale from 1 to 5.
Garbage.
Let's do 5. I feel like 5's a good number.
Where 1 is garbage and 5 is garbage, it's garbage.
Okay. So I don't know how we could populate the scale. Like, what would be a 5?
What?
Do you think Deep Carbon Observatory, which was not a hex crawl,
it was a point
but
crawl.
we did crawl? Is
Better.
that 5?
I don't know if I would say it's a 5.
Have you seen a 5?
If you have to have a 5, sure. Of the things we have done, which are point or hex crawls, sure, that's up there.
Yeah.
And the stuff that Daniel did with Wizards of Point Crawl with Alabama, that was good. And the reason why...
But not a 5.
But, 4 or 5, who can say? But
1.4.
Sure. But this was definitely the worst for me, and this is my big 2 points of contention for Tim.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
One is that there's just this huge disconnect between the scale that they provide of how big is a hex, and even if it's traditional how big a hex is, and then the map that they actually overlaid the hexes upon does not make sense. Like, if you're gonna do that, at least try not to break the believability of it. You know, make the actual physical drawings of mountains and things like that be consistent with the sizes of the hex that you're giving.
Right, because you had a volcano whose opening was like...
At least 2.5 miles wide.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Which may exist. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe 5 miles, yeah.
But as usual, for Tim, it all comes down to size.
Clearly. The second issue is that the amount of interesting things that can or do happen within those hexes. So, like with the point crawls, with the Deep Carbon Observatory and Daniel's Alabama stuff, is that there was always intentional and interesting things to be found if it's on a table or if it was static, like you're going to find it. Whereas in this, the amount of rolls that we had to do for every hex, regardless of their size, and the amount of compared to the amount of interesting things that could potentially happen upon those rolls was bad.
Yeah, and I'd suggest that it's more about that than about the actual scale or size, because we don't play in a real physical space. We play in a procedural space, and the procedural space was tedious, to say the least. It's non-enjoy. Like I guess I don't understand. Like if they sat down and play tested this at all, how it made it into the book in its current form. Like, did they sit around and say, oh, this is fun? Or is it just like, oh, I guess we have to have some kind of travel procedure, and this kind of makes sense, so let's do this, and
this isn't fun,
upon that
but that's okay.
Place.
We're down fun down to 0, because we're going to do this with a hardcore crew.
I have a feeling that hardly anybody actually ran it that way, that they hand-waved a bunch of stuff. The book even talks about it. Oh, just put this in this hex, or when you want them to find X, do Y, that kind of thing, which is antithetical to how a hex crawl should actually work, because you should be immersively experiencing exploration, not having content fed to you. Yeah. So I think there's a bit of inconsistency in desires and then methods on WotC's part. there.
It's another issue of poor editing.
Yeah,
I've seen this
and if
consistency
you
out
want
there.
people to encounter content, just make them do it and have everybody say, okay, like this is going to be a little railroad, just embrace it, because that's better than pretending that it's something it's not.
Yeah.
Or you could have a map that is pre-populated, and the person, your guys, they just move around a little piece, and they can move the piece, and you say, "Oh, there's nothing there."
Yeah, because that takes 1
It's more
second.
jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then the
would-
piece,
yeah.
and you say, "Oh,
So much faster.
yeah, there's a literal dragon here."
Yeah.
And then also have flavor text. Okay.
That would be way better. That would be way better. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and
Just
I'd be kind of down with that.
Resolution being quicker is an important thing for sure, and especially because, like you guys were saying earlier, the encounters tended not to be super interesting. A lot of it's like there's three dice collider dinosaurs. They're not doing anything, and that costs 30 seconds of your time. Now you can
There's
print
a
out.
dinosaur. It seems interested in you. It approaches you. It literally walks up to you, sniffing because it's curious. I reach my hand out to you. Oh, it whomps you with its tail.
Yeah.
Well,
So
okay.
I'll say so. Maybe Wizards of the Coast have maybe they have better market research. Maybe they are in fact, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they are in fact better tapped into what people actually care about.
Yeah, maybe we are the extreme minority.
Maybe we're the problem here. I don't know. So I'd love to hear from other listeners about that. But or I'd love to hear about the listener about that from the listener.
The
about
listener.
that. I'd love to hear from the listener about that.
From you.
From you, the listener.
From you. I did see that a lot of people had done Excel sheets where they had pre-rolled everything, and you just work from a script. That would be better, but the problem is that's not what the book says to do.
Right.
So yeah, that's an improvement, but that's not Tomb of Annihilation. That's a DIY hack of a Tomb of Annihilation, which is not what I wanted to review.
Yeah.
So that's why I was being a stickler for insisting upon the procedures, because that's what's in the book, and so it's a sort of exercise that we were doing in
Yes.
addition to playing.
Okay.
Or like dinosaur racing. That just seemed really out of just like
They didn't even provide a flow chart. Like I had to look in. It seemed like a rather large amount of text to find out how to make it work, and it wasn't very interesting once I did find out. But again, people have produced stuff on DM's Guild and all that to help you make those interesting. But again, they shouldn't have to do that. It's a full price product.
Argumentatively, Skyrim. You can apply all this to Skyrim, because guess what made Skyrim great? The modding community.
That's
on,
true.
On PC, and people are still playing it. When it first came out, a lot of people loved it, but then eventually they came back and they're like, "Oh, this is so horrible," and then the modding community made it better.
Yep.
But people still bought it, I guess. I don't know.
Before I had it on PC, I played it on Xbox or whatever, and I had fun with it. But yeah, the modders make it better. Just like the modders always make D&D stuff better. Mm-hmm. That's just the thing that's always going to happen. But we should still expect that the companies producing this stuff should do a better job.
Yeah, I think it's a little different with a video game. Okay, so video games cost a ton of money to produce.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
then we roll out $60 or whatever for it. And maybe it isn't perfect. Maybe it isn't exactly what people wanted. Maybe sometimes it's flawed, like in the melee system in Elder Scrolls or in
Garbage.
I mean, it's so bad. Or like the stealth system, I think too, is so bad. It's so broken.
Yeah. It's barely even a system.
But they did provide like bones there, and you can build. You spend a lot of time.
And they
building.
intentionally built it knowing and intending for people to be able to.
Yeah, by Skyrim, certainly they knew that people would mod it.
And I feel like we know from experience that you can produce a more complete product that answers all the important questions and is packed of fun and not of tedious, arbitrary procedures that will just waste people's lives unnecessarily. I know, just in principle, we know that it can be done. And so I guess, I don't know why Wizards doesn't do that. And they're charging, $60 for this product that is kind of not complete and that requires a community to actually make it worthwhile in some way.
Woke.
Because if you run it as intended, you are going to be extremely depressed for a long period of time. I mean,
It broke us.
like if you could imagine like dedicating hours of your life every week to this for a year or 2 years, or who knows how long it would even take to actually finish it. And is that really worthwhile? Is that how we should be spending our lives? Is that what Wizards wants us to do?
Yes. No, they just want you to buy a product.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
they want you to buy a product, and they're not really expecting people to use it
Yes.
the way they wrote it.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
They made a system. They expect you to use their system 5e, and then they're just putting out material to make money and give you ideas.
It's like a bunch of half-brained suggestions.
Yeah, and so they're not worried about making it perfect because they know if they put all that time and effort into it and spend all this money like hiring writers and editors and playtesters and really 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 do a good job releasing something, that people are just gonna hack it up anyway.
How many hundreds of hours do you want to sink into like those just few glimpses of RPG brilliance that you guys as a group will put together and that you might remember for a long time? I mean, how many hundreds of hours of boring procedures and half-baked ideas and poorly defined motivations of the characters and awful flavor text.
Well, it super cuts into their profit margin like huge amounts if they go above and beyond on these things. And I think they probably looked and said, we're not going to sell any more or any less if we really ramp it up, because people that are going to buy them are pretty much going to buy them anyway.
That's probably true. Now, the antidote to this, and I think I wish I had chosen instead of this, is Hot Springs Island. Have you seen it, Jim?
I haven't read it.
Okay, I have it.
I'm trying not to.
I have it. I'm tempted to spring for the physical book. So, Hot Springs Island is done by, I think, Jacob Hurst is his name, just some guy from Texas. And it's a hex crawl.
But
yeah.
Just some guy from Texas.
Just some guy from Texas.
Not a company.
No, it's just one person.
Decades of experience and teams of people.
Right.
Whose job... Okay, just making sure.
He did all the art and the text himself. Right?
No, all the art too?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the art
I just assumed the art was bought.
The art is amazing. Okay. And it's an island, just like this, with hexes. They may even be 10 miles across. I don't know. Except they're much more abstract. There's very little topography listed on them. But every hex is filled with awesome junk. And there's no... This ties into the bigger problem with Tomb of Annihilation specifically that I want to talk about, but there's no overarching objective on the hex crawl. There's no like endpoint, because if you see an endpoint, everything else in the hex or in the hexes is merely an obstacle to getting there instead of the goal itself. So in Hot Springs Island, you're just there to explore, and everything you find in any hex can be the next thing you're wanting, the next thing you're chasing, or something on your way to that, rather than just content to plow through to get to where you finally want to go. So that's the thing. You know the Tomb of Annihilation is there. So, I mean, it instructs you at the beginning with like your patron sending you there. So you just know you got to grind up your 9 levels to get to the dungeon. So anything between level 1 and 9 is preparation, really, instead of the thing itself.
Dude, this
mentally.
Thing is rich with...
I know. So Hot Springs Island, check it out.
Oh, he's got
Tim's looking
there
at
are
it
2
right
books.
now.
He's got some NSFW stuff in here, but it's all high quality.
Yes. He's got 2 books. One is the Field Guide, which is a full book, and you can just give it to your players. Mm-hmm. It has like huge illustrations and write-ups.
Field Guide right here.
About all the fauna and creatures in there, and your players can just look at it and say, oh, I want to go try to find one of these, or whatever. Or, oh, I think I read about that in the Field Guide. And then the other book is for the DM. It's called The Dark of Hot Springs Island.
So this one's the Field Guide's $40, and the Dark is $60.
I've got it in PDF, and it's really good.
Yeah, it's a beautiful physical book too.
Yeah,
it looks
and
really
the dungeons
nice.
are all laid out so that everything is easy to like run. And like when you get a random encounter, it always lists like things that the encounter objects are doing, like the monsters or whatever.
Which that should be.
Yeah,
it
so
is.
that product is far, far better than Tomb of Annihilation, while doing pretty much the same thing and being produced by one person.
I'm very interested in trying that out.
Yeah.
So
just looking at it, I was like, oh, that looks great.
Yeah, and
it reminds me of like the Maze of the Blue Medusa and that kind of quality.
Yeah, I was about to bring up that point. Like Maze of the Blue Medusa. I mean, it conceptually it almost could be like put on a hex kind of thing in a similar way, where every space that you move in, whatever direction you move in, there's something just kind of neat and weird to find that is engaging. It's not randomly generated, like thrown together stuff where you like in this you probably roll on the table and there's a space and there's like a creature and then the DM has to come up with something interesting to engage the players with those things, and you have to make up what the creature will do in your head. And there's but every space in Maze of Blue Medusa is rich. It's thick with history and detail and levels to explore, and it's interconnected with most things in the rest of the dungeon.
And again, that was done by 2 guys and published by 1 guy, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So it really is surprising the difference in quality between the flagship products and random dudes on the internet.
It almost makes you think that maybe because the nature of the product and that it's almost all just a book, right? It's essentially just text and words. It's writing, a compendium. Everything has to go together, and that's going to be more consistent and the quality potentially better if it's coming from 1 or 2 people who are working closely together as opposed to a giant team. Usually, because the more people we have on the team, the harder it is to keep things consistent. Whereas a video game, all those things come together in a different way to make a final product that is phenomenal, as opposed to a book that's essentially words. For it to be good, it doesn't even need to have art or any of that stuff. It just needs to have good content that is essentially thoughts put into words. So I almost feel like maybe because you have a bigger team of all these...
What you're saying is books are just words. And sometimes pictures.
Exactly.
No.
Wait, all my books have pictures. But I don't know, I almost think that maybe that has something to do with it. It just makes it harder and more... it just makes it more difficult to come out with a consistently good...
So you're saying there's a
like
conceptual space that is well encompassed or well captured in the minds of a small number of individuals that may not be in like a team environment.
That's what I'm thinking.
The idea may be so poorly formed in like a group of people that it has no real depth or no real substance.
Also, it is the same very small group of people whose vision is behind all these corporate products. Like if you look at the credits to all these modules for Pathfinder and D&D, it's all like the same, 20, 30 people. Whereas all these indie things are just made by people who are very talented and have done this stuff for a while with a lot of passion into it, and whose visions may be not constrained by certain corporate guidelines.
And then with Zach and Pat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sure they have a budget. Like, it's like, hey, you have this much money to make this thing happen, and because in order for them to justify all the extra time and effort, they have to sell X amount more. And so we end up with these
They have a checklist
things
like
because it's like, hey, we put something together that actually functions. Whether it functions well or not,
I feel like they probably start with like a storyboard kind of thing or something, and then they have like spaces to fill on this storyboard kind of idea that they have. And a whole bunch of people just fill in these spaces, and sometimes with not very much care, not very much love put in. They just put it there because it has to kind of be there, I guess. I imagine that the process is something like that. But
yeah, I mean they're not taking chances, right?
Yeah, but I could see where you could do it in a team, and maybe this is. I hope that Wizards receives this in love. I'll say maybe it could be approached in a way that you kind of agree on like the general themes, but then like very small teams work on individual parts, but they do it in a way that isn't like a checklist. They do it in a way where they put in things that they care about, where they actually. It interests them. They want to work on this thing. It's not a job or something. There's assign them areas they're passionate about or whatever. So I'd be in charge of magic in the magic area. Love magic. Big magic user. And I could see, for instance, us doing something like that. Where there's like where we have like a general idea of something that ties it all together, but that we each work on our own things to the depth that we care about them, and then kind of stick them together.
Well, the TLDR, Hot Springs Island is really good. Get it. Don't get Tomb of Annihilation.
Yeah, but so we're talking like a bunch of hot springs mushed together, or something like that. but smaller.
GG Nori.
Yeah. I could talk about this all night, guys.